Hi, folks. I'm Herb Stevenson.
And I'm David Harris.
We're here speaking about natural passages, the unmarked doors of life. And David is a longtime friend, and I'm just going to have him introduce himself. So, David, if you'd say a few things.
Yeah, absolutely, Herb. First of all, what a pleasure it is to be doing the Natural Passages stuff with you. I've been an admirer and a listener and watcher of it for a long time. Um, uh, for about 25 years, we've been doing leadership development work with horses. Before that, I was in the corporate world and experienced a kind of burnout, overstretched myself completely, and came across personal development, coaching, etc. And at the same time, had this parallel path of finding horses. And one of the things that I noticed was when I was with the horses, I didn't know the language then, I didn't know what was happening. But what I now know is happening was I got real present. And I started noticing how actually I was learning as much about myself with the horses and what I was doing with consciousness with the horses as I did in doing all the classroom stuff and everything else. So Sharon and I developed, Sharon's my wife, we developed this program that we've been running for 25 years, which helps and support leaders, teams on how to be more effective in leadership with the support. Actually, it's not with the support of horses. The horses do it all really. So that's what we do.
Sure, sure. So, by the way, you want to tell them where you're located?
Oh yeah. I'm in the UK. I'm near London in Windsor. Of course, you used to say Windsor and no one knew what it was, but now Harry and stuff got married there. It's in Windsor. So it's just west. Yeah, just west of London. Yeah,
Good,
the
good.
UK. That's why the strange accent.
Well, I think most people would have figured it out, but it gives a little bit more of a reference point for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, well, we start with a little bit about, you attended the Natural Passages program for men some years ago. Well, we just start there about how you've integrated presence from that experience into your work now with the horses.
Well, um, for me, it was extremely interesting, that whole process from a number of perspectives. First of all, to have a deliberate structure that helps men evolve, which I always struggled with. Um, I always struggled with the sort of transition from boy to man and whatever, and the structure you've created for that and the processes and everything else really, really helped that. And then what I realized was a huge part of that was presence. I don't think I necessarily had all the language to go with it, but a huge part of that was presence. And what you do on the program is really help people understand when they're not present and what the implications of not being present are. And then the sort of evolution of that continued. We introduced it, although I didn't know we were doing it in the horse work, Herb, initially, we were. And the way that we would do that is with people with breath. We would utilize people to utilize their breath in a mindful way. And I think mindfulness and presence kind of, it's almost the same thing, they one leads to the other. And we would get the people to be with the horse in a very conscious and present way. And I think there's a duality here because I think horses help us get present. And as we get present, the relationship builds. So it's kind of this symbiotic relationship. And what we found very quickly was people who were nervous and fearful of the horses by their own admission quickly weren't. And that was an expression of them being present, because so often when someone would come to us and say, "Oh, I'm really scared of horses," I'd say, "Okay, I get that. Is there some reason?" And they go, "No, I'm just scared of horses." Now, sometimes there is, and often it was my previous experience with horses was I was on a beach in the Bahamas and someone slapped the thing on the butt and it ran down the beach, which would cause you to be scared of horses. But actually, when people were coming into presence and actually dealing with what do I need to, what needs my focus right here and right now, they realized that the horses actually helped them get that. And they also realized that actually there's nothing to be fearful of. I need to be, in actual fact, I always say to people in horsemanship, you'll never get hurt if you're present, because
True.
People say horses are unpredictable. I don't think that's true. I think horses are incredibly predictable. The challenge is if we're not present and noticing small signals of what the horses are doing, then we miss something, then we miss it again, then we miss something that's building up, and then something happens which is not what we want. I think the thing also with this, Herb, is I could equally have been saying that about people.
Well, I think that's true, David, because I want to add a little piece here to this. Obviously, most people may not know this, but my wife Jackie does very similar to what you do.
Absolutely.
I live on we have 6 horses, and it's an 80-acre horse farm. But when you're talking about horses and presence, the thing that I want, well, often people don't really recognize, horses are simply present. They don't have a monkey mind story going on in the back of their head about all the bad things that's going to happen. They don't have all these other things. They're just very alert to what's going on around them. They're very energetically sensitive. And so when we get near them, that very big energetic field just kind of holds us and makes us realize something that I often say is the safest place in the world is inside your own body.
Yeah,
If you're
absolutely.
there, if you're not in your body, you're in your mind, jibber jabbering or afraid or whatever other stories. So that's one of the biggest things I think that I take from it and applies to what you and you do is because horses are predatory animals. Um, they are prey animals. I mean, they are always on alert,
Yeah.
and so that is one of the things. It's interesting because they're only alert in the moment about what's happening. They're not alert telling a story like we do.
Sharon has this great thing. She says, tell the horse you've got a Prada handbag. Tell the horse you've got a Porsche Carrera. The horse doesn't give a damn. The horse wants to know who is this right in front of me now. And time after time we get beautiful examples about people not being present, then coming into presence and noticing the benefit. We had my sort of life horse was a guy called John Joe, big Irish sports horse. And this guy came to us one day and said, horses bite me. So immediately he's not present. He's in the past. Horses bite me. So I'm actually holding this place in the past. And so I said to him, John Joe's a big softy. He's never bitten anyone. And he moved towards John Joe, and John Joe started moving towards him like he was going to bite him. And I grabbed this guy and I said, how do you get, it's kind of a skill. How do you get horses to bite you? It's perhaps not a skill you want, but it's a skill. I said, what are you doing? And he said, nothing. Well, there's no such thing as nothing, is there? So I said, so what's happening? You're clearly doing something. And he said, a friend of mine told me that horses smell your fear.
Yeah, that's good.
So, yeah. So I was pretending not to be scared. He was doing the John Wayne walk, and the energy inside was, I'm scared. So I said, okay, try this for a size. Go and tell John Joe how you're truly feeling. And first of all, the way he walked towards him was different because he's now, like you say, he's in his body. He's owning the feelings that he's experiencing. And he went up to John Joe and he said, do you know, John Joe, I'm really scared. And John Joe just put his head down like that and he rubbed his head. And I think this is what is so powerful about this business of how we can get present with ourselves, because actually we become extraordinarily powerful in that same way that Brené Brown describes when you get vulnerable, because there is a kind of vulnerability. Telling someone you're scared is a kind of vulnerability, but it's also the truth.
But the
So there's
interesting thing I want to tie into that, because the comment a lot of people say is the animals smell. They don't smell it; they feel the energy. Fear is
yeah,
energy, and so if you own it, there's a quality of being present that says, "Okay, I'm afraid,
yeah,
but I'm doing it from a place of inside myself instead of projection." And I think that's a critical piece that you guys do, especially if you're working. Obviously, my wife does, is getting people inside their bodies. So I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm trying to clarify for people that it's the authenticity of just being present. And that's with all animals, generally speaking.
Totally agree.
It brings them closer to you and we feel better.
Yeah, and one of the major things for me, and what I didn't realize, Herb, to a degree, there's layers of this presence. So I think there's, at one level, there's that guy who says, I'm scared. In that moment, he is. And what it took me a while to work out was when I was in the corporate world, one of the things I was doing was sort of this in my ego. I thought I should be doing this, should be doing that. I was projecting something that I felt should be true about myself, and as it turns out, wasn't. That was influencing the decisions I made in a very profound way because actually what I through the work that I did on myself and like I realized that when I was a young kid at school a teacher had told me she couldn't believe how stupid I was.
Mhm.
Okay, now I'm like 6 or 7. I'm 40 running this software consultancy holding that, not consciously. I think this is the terrifying bit about it. It's not a conscious thing. I'm not constantly referring back to it, although I remember it vividly nearly 60 years ago. But actually, the decisions and things I'm making are being influenced overly by that experience of when I was 6. So one of the things that we notice when people are with the horses is they get present at many levels. The first level, I think, is that level of owning how you feel. And the second level is this, or a different level, is actually I've been running this, and monkey chatter is a brilliant way of describing it. Whatever that the term for it, I'm running this monkey chatter, and it's influencing how I am right here, right now. And actually, I thought I was present, but actually,
Sure.
this thing is influencing me. And time again, we get people have these breakthroughs and noticing aha moments, whatever you want to call it, of actually how much the past, or sometimes even the projection of if I do this, then this may happen, or whatever. Again, you're not present now because you're in the future. Whatever will happen when they get with the horses, focus on what it is that's true for them, focus on the outcome that they're looking for. The energy shifts, and as you say, I think it's right. This is a complete misconception that they smell fear. I get the impression they feel it, and we know actually that they feel it. One of the things we actually have started doing now is we get the old divining rods. I don't know if you've ever done this little game, and just see the difference in each other, and then put it to a horse and how the horse is feeling with different things. You can actually then see it. So it comes out of Sharon can feel energy. I'm not so good at it. But instead of being able to see it and imagine it, you can actually see it. So these things help people understand that actually, if you get present, you can deal with pretty much anything.
Yeah, if you're fully embodied in your body, you're
Yep,
inside, the mind's quiet,
yep,
um, then that's why I said it before, the safest place in the world is inside your body if you're fully present.
I love that.
Because you don't have fear bouncing around inside your head. Um, you actually can feel your body, which is one of the things that happens in any type of embodied presence, but especially with horses, because you suddenly, the interesting part of that about the horses is it actually quiets the mind.
Yeah,
The energy is so large that presence actually supports us. And so I want to go back to your comment about the guy that was getting bit by horses, because this is something I've been exploring here lately, a lot about presence and conscious awareness.
yeah,
Our energy precedes our body. It also precedes our own meaning making and awareness. And so if I'm projecting that energy of fear out in front of me, and feeling it in my body, I'm just radiating like a radar of pushing this stuff out there. And I think that's the thing that people don't really understand is they are putting that energy out into the field. It's why some people back up.
mm,
People
yeah.
say, I don't trust you because there's no one present. There's somebody who has a hidden agenda or a hidden fear.
Totally. And of course, the useful thing about doing this work with horses, Herb, is exactly the same rules apply to people. If it was just a way of influencing horses and getting connected with a horse, that's all great and it's jolly good fun. But how useful is it when I'm at a board meeting and you know something's going on and I can't work out what's going on? Again, a lot of the way I relay information is with stories, and so we had this similar thing, and this guy rocked up, and he was actually a scientist, and he worked with salespeople. And sometimes what we do when we bring the horses in, we let if they've been on the hard standing, winter, they can't roll over and stuff. We let them loose for 5 minutes, and they jump around and are bucking and everything. And the whole group was doing this except one horse. Her name was Floozy, of course. And Floozy is just kind of standing there. And this guy said to me, he said, that looks just like one of our board meetings. All this shouting and whatever. What I didn't realize that he had noticed was Floozy was standing still. And he said they were all rushing around and everything. And then she came over and stood in front of him and looked like nose to nose, looked at him. And he said, oh my God, isn't that an incredible presence? And I said, I just want you to notice something, because the story that was running for him, his way of not being present was when I'm with the sales guys and they're all bucking and running around, the only way I can make an impression is to do what they do.
Oh, sure.
And this little horse got him to realize actually, me being myself, quiet, grounded, I call it grounded, centered, present, all those things together,
Sure.
actually, I can still make a powerful influence. And for him, this was transformative,
Sure.
because the whole stories that he's carrying from some point, someone said something or he's felt something, you can dispel it with that. And I think one of the powerful things about working with the horses, Herb, is it's non-verbal completely. There's no being clever with words or whatever. It's actually a visceral feeling that you get when you get that connection with the horse. And I'm so pleased you talk about the monkey chatter vanishing, because one of the things that most people report is when they get really effective, whether that be leading a horse or working with it at liberty, it's silent. There's no should I do this, shouldn't I do that? It's just in flow, and that person is just with the horse, connected with the horse, and it just happens. And when that happens, one of the things that really astounds people, we do a particular structure and we call it distance and nearness. And fundamentally, what you actually start is by asking the horse to move away, because what we want people to practice is truly and authentically, with presence, saying no, because a lot of us struggle with that. It's a boundary or whatever. So we've got a little structure. They do that. They ask the horse to move away. The monkey chatter says, when I say no to people, they're going to not like me. They're going to, think I'm whatever. There's a whole series list of things that people say. The truth is, when you're authentic with your no and actually say to the horse, I want to be in connection with you, but I need some space for safety, for instance, you get that connection going and then come into nearness. So our friend Gerhardt calls the experiment distance and nearness. When you come into nearness, that horse is on you. It wants to be with you because it trusts you, because you've got a boundary. We got a horse called Levi. And if you don't put boundaries down, he wants nothing to do with you.
Sure. So I want to go back to something that you said about the individual with a floozy.
Yeah,
What happens frequently, and people don't understand it, is I use the phrase healing presence.
yeah,
And what Floozy did was, by being fully present and your client matching that resonance, that's when the awareness of a healing, because that's what it is. There's an inhibition or something that says I shouldn't do this, I have to do that. His case was he had to be, wild and woolly like the rest of them. And the same thing is happens with people, is when we're just fully present and they calm down, they can have an insight just by being with you.
yeah,
And that, you experienced that with the program when you were here, but I know you've experienced it also on a repeated basis with the horses. Is their presence is so powerful, and what people don't understand is dynamic is it creates a resonance between the two. And if I'm willing to resonate with you, being the horse or a person, what often happens is there's a sense of safety that allows an insight to just come out, just
Absolutely.
happens. And that's what we call healing presence.
I think you've absolutely nailed it with the language and everything else, Herb. And actually, with Global Warriors, the organization I'm with now, one of the things we used to say was, our sort of one of the things we aspired to is healing leaders, because actually this lack of presence that we can be in is like carrying something around. I mean, what I experienced when I, I'm not an expert. I get out of presence like anyone else does. What I'm pretty good at doing is noticing when I do it now, thanks to your program. Horses are brilliant for doing it because they just don't want to know if you're not present. I'm pretty good at noticing when I'm not and thinking, okay, Dave, come back. What do you need now? Take a breath. Whatever, put your hand on the horse, whatever it is to get back present with something. When we get into that space, it becomes almost magical
Sure.
because you are dealing with things with a purity of thought, if it needs thought, because all that stuff that was happened apart in the past that was muddying the waters of your mind, or all that projection of this could happen or may happen or whatever, that all clears. And what you actually end up with is a clarity of thought and a clarity. I think this is probably more important than the thought, a clarity of energy, which people really pick up on. And I
Agree.
think I've often, Sharon and I have had discussions about the work appears magical. A friend of mine, Emma, says, when something happens and it's exactly the right thing to happen at that moment, Emma says, sorry, it's a little bit rude. She says, you couldn't make this shit up. You could not design an intervention to happen in that way. Um, a great example is people's resistance to ask for help, Herb.
Sure.
It's someone who's a little bit nervous of the horse. Their colleagues are with them. They're trying to do perhaps something simple like lead the horse. And I'll ask them, I say, what is it you need right now? And they say, I have no idea. I don't know what to do. Okay. What would help you right now? I don't know. Okay. And sometimes you almost have to say, what would happen if you asked for help? Oh, well, I would have failed, whatever.
Sure.
Then when you have the experience of, I actually get them to physically ask for help because if I just hand it out, then they still haven't asked for help. It's, you're perpetuating that pattern. Ask for help. Someone comes up, someone helps. Two things happen. Energetically, they get connected with the horse. All three. So you've got the horse, the person who's asked for help, and the person who's helping. Everything becomes way easier and way less angst. And the thing that's so powerful for me is when someone does that, I always ask the person who's asked for help, how was that? And they say, it was a joy to help you. Yet we,
You're eliminating all of the shoulds, oughts, and what I'm supposed to be's, and allowing them to finally just acknowledge themselves in that present moment.
yeah,
Which reminds me of a phrase that I probably said to you many times, but I definitely have said to many people. How old do you have to be to give yourself permission to be who you are?
yeah,
And it's usually dumbfounded because they don't know the answer.
mm,
And so, what you're talking about is the process of once we give ourselves permission to just be in this moment, it's not only the shoulds and all these other things that get in our way, it's like we step into ourself without really realizing it, similar to what happened to there, because it felt wonderful to be fully embodied.
yeah,
And that's the whole idea of presence that is so important to us as people don't understand it. Because one of the things that I don't think most people understand, pure presence was our natural state the day we were born. We
yeah,
didn't have anything else but just being. And experiencing all the stimulus and all this strange feeling of hunger and all these other things. And over time, we had to create a structure to make meaning of it and how to survive and how to walk. And so the whole purpose of it, actually, in a way, a human experience is to be out of presence.
Yeah.
And now we're all working hard to become present.
And we design tools and stuff. The greatest tool for being not present for me, is the mobile phone with all its apps and everything else. If I experience myself sometimes, and I just go, Dave, is this the way you really want to be spending your time? You know, and I
Well,
think
that's true. I mean, think about it, not only that, they don't know how to socialize. They know how to send a text to a friend sitting at a table, but they don't know how to have a conversation.
absolutely. And I think the other thing is, Herb, it's a kind of masking because I think a lot of people. I remember a lady coming to the workshop one day, and she said to me, "What's going to happen?" I said, "You're going to find out who you truly are." And her face dropped. And I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "No. What if I don't like who I truly am?" And I said, "That's, yeah, interesting question." I said, "I'll tell you what my response can be. In my experience, all the things that people don't like about themselves come from lack of presence. We have this term where we call the I am, which is another way of describing presence, and then those outer layers of pretense and fear and all that stuff." I said, "In my experience, all the stuff we don't like about ourselves is in those external layers and stuff. When we get into who we truly are, you can you cannot not like yourself because you're totally aligned. We're not born evil or bad or anything else. We just learn shit that takes us out of presence. And then, and then we go, oh, I'm a terrible person. Just come back to yourself, come back to presence. I've been quoting the Marianne Williams thing, our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our greatest fear is we are powerful beyond measure. For 25 years, that was one of those things that when I read it, first of all, I thought Nelson Mandela wrote it because it was his inaugural speech. But that was one of those things, Herb, that I read, and it was like one of those deep, deep truths. And for me, when I get in doubt or anything else, I just remember that passage or think about it, the first few words. And that's one of those tools that I've got to help me get back into presence.
Sure. Well, it's part of civilization or civilizing people into society is to teach them the do's and don'ts of what prior people did to experience. And then unfortunately, just a whole lot of bad behavior got imprinted and it's been passed down generation to generation.
Yeah.
And my father grew up in the Depression, and in the process, the biggest fear was imported, impacting him and taught on him was uh, no matter what, if you're not busy at work, get busy. Don't give them an excuse to fire you,
Yeah.
get rid of you. And took me a long time, and I understood it because uh, I at first I thought it was a crazy answer, but on the other side of it, I began to understand it, and then I also then over time, as I got to know my father, understand where that came from
Mm,
because it was abused by a lot of employers. If you're not busy, then I got 10 other people out here, and they use it as a fear basis to make people work harder and do different things. And I think that still permeates a lot of society because, you and I both grew up with a whole lot of shoulds of how to be successful.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so what we're both trying to do is to support people to realize something else. You don't have to live with a head full of thinking shoulds. You can actually be very present. And the funny part is you don't have to strategize your thinking. Whatever you need in that moment, your thoughts will be clear.
Absolutely.
I mean, people ask me about, how do I stand up and talk and do the things I do for sometimes an extended period of time. I don't have any notes. And they said, did you memorize all of it? And I said, no, I just know it. And he said, what do you mean? I says, whatever we're talking about, the thoughts and the information will come forward. I don't worry about saying the right thing. I just say what I know.
Yeah.
And they struggle with that because they think you have to memorize, you have to have a script, and you have to have all these various types of things. And part of it might be that we're getting a little older, so we don't our give a shit factor isn't as high. But uh, I
Totally.
I I find that to be true, and that's why just the same as like the podcast. I don't we don't have scripts; we just have a conversation because then truth comes out.
And I think part of that, a massive part of that, Herb, is, I thought to myself for this, should I make notes and everything? And I told you I didn't. And I think that is because the notes are before the podcast. How do I know what's going to come up in the podcast? My most effective way of being is to be here and be present with you, then, and trust that when a thought comes to me that's relevant to this conversation, I'll blurt it out. Or if whatever it is. But there's a kind of a trust that goes in with that, which I think is really powerful because one of the, we draw these outer layers when we explain to people sometimes, and a massive word in there is doubt, I think. And people say, well, you must doubt yourself sometimes. And I said, I don't doubt myself. What I might do is say, do you know, this is something I'm not an expert on. I can give you my opinion, but I choose not to talk about it. Or, I'd be interested to know what you do. That business of a guy called Fred Kaufman calls it being a knower. I
Sure,
have to know this, and I have to. Underpinning that is, if I don't, then it means something. Well, guess what? No one knows everything.
sure,
How about if in our conversation I say to someone in my presence, say, do you know that I hold a differing opinion to that? I'm really interested in your opinion because my one might be flawed. We're going to find something out. If we're both present and not needing to be the winner or the knower or whatever,
sure.
we're just open to possibility. There's the worst, you could look at it worse. One of the things that could happen is you find out you're wrong. And the second thing that you could find out is actually why that person thinks like that,
Sure.
which is really powerful.
One of the things that I do similar to that is because I'm not competing, I will ask somebody, I said, help me understand how you got to that conclusion.
I love that.
They look at me and it says, no, and I'm saying, I'm serious. I just want to understand. I may not agree or may disagree. The issue for me is I really want to understand how you came to that conclusion. And that does open a dialogue and a conversation. But you can only do that if you're present.
Of course you can. Because you're not trying to prove that you're better than or anything else. You're actually just curious.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting
Um,
times right now. We got all these divisions throughout the world. So it's interesting times. And uh, there's a whole lot of you got to be right and you got to be wrong
hmm.
instead of how do we come together to understand each other. So it's a different time than in the past.
One of the things whenever I'm introducing the horses, because I kind of go into a position of if I 26 years ago and someone said to me, come and spend the day with horses to improve your leadership, I would have been busy. Do you know what I mean? What I'd have found a way to get out of that. So something that I want to be able to, for people to do to actually get present in a way to get rid of that question that's asking what's the relevance. I just talk to them about horses, and depending on who you listen to, horses have been on the planet 60 odd million years. And they have experienced incredible changes of environment. Really, they don't really know where the next meal's coming from. Wild horses constantly moving, whatever. They live in this space of the unknown unknown. You don't know what's going to happen. It may be some sort of predator, maybe a fire, whatever. It may be nothing. They don't know. And what they do, the way I put words to it, is they sense and respond. So they check everything out. Nothing needs to happen now. I'm going to continue eating grass. Something changes, perhaps with one of the herd. They notice it because they're present. Does that need my attention? And if it needs my attention, they move. They've done that for 60 million years. One of the challenges that we have sorry, going back to that, that's called a sustainable system. 60 odd million years would suggest it was. One of the challenges that we have is the way that we find comfort is with certainty. And actually, there is no certainty. The only thing that you can actually control When you're present is how you respond to what's happening around you. And so I always say to people that if you can actually just take the time or the headspace to notice what's happening for you, you've got to be in your body, as you say, then actually when those stimulus happen, you can make a choice, which is inner power. Because then you're not the victim to a situation, you're actually choosing how to respond to it.
The issue for me that ties directly into that is um, in today's environment, we've lost our sensibilities because we are facing completely unseen territories and how people are behaving, how countries are behaving. So not only is certainty taken out, it's created a massive amount of internal chaos because we don't know how to make meaning of it.
Yeah.
And that seems to be permeating the world right now. I was earlier today in a conversation with somebody in Sarajevo, and we were talking about what was happening in Serbia and that whole area over there in Bosnia.
Yeah.
And they are as in chaotic, as much chaos as we are in the U.S. And and somewhat you guys are
Mm.
in the UK. And it's because we have an energy that's, I basically say, is fighting for control. The question most of us fail to realize, this is not a time to do something per se. It's to how do I get present, make meaning of this so that I can effectively take care of myself and then begin to look at how do I make meaning in this in a way that's constructive, consistent with my values, and hopefully will begin to shape life in a better way. And right now we all feel helpless because it's all happening at the highest levels.
Yeah.
But I truly believe this. I believe what's happening is we're forming a new, let's just say, social order.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to go into oligarchy or dictatorship like a lot of people think. I think we're being tested to sit down and say is, okay, if this is a fight for control, is it going to be by the masses or is it going to be by a few people?
Yeah. Totally.
That requires us having presence of mind, not fear of mind.
Yeah. And so often fear, when I talk to people about fear of the horses, I say, so what is it you're fearful? If you want to play this game, what do you fear? That horse could bite me. That horse could. I said it could. And it hasn't. In 25 years, it hasn't. So notice how you're taking yourself out of presence. What needs your attention this second? This second, not 2 seconds time. This very second. Well, that horse looks kind of docile, I often say. So that's because they're relaxed, because you're relaxed.
So that's a very similar process that needs to be done on a global basis. More
Absolutely.
people who can get centered and figure out how to engage the other person. Um, we begin to create a new way of being with each other. And I think that's the critical piece. David, I'm looking at our time and we've gone a while. So but
That's not like you and me, Herb, to crack on a bit.
we could go on for a while. So I think we'll end it at this one and down the road, we'll have you back and we'll have another conversation if you're open to that.
That would be a joy. And if I can close off with one thing, Herb, and it's the way that you and I close off, really, because people say to me, what can I do? And I'll give the answer that you and I both, when we finish our conversations, just keep doing the work. Influence the things you can influence in a positive way. If it's out of your control, be a positive influence, but can't control it. You can only control the way you respond to stuff. So thank you. It's been a real joy. And I can't believe that all this time's shot by.
I did. So,
Barely know.
all right. Well, folks, we appreciate it. I'm Herb Stevenson, and this is my friend.
David Harris.
And we thank you for watching. The podcasts come out every 2 weeks, so we hopefully you'll subscribe, and we'll continue to grow and provide these as in the future. And if you're wanting other ideas about some of the things that I do, the Thoughts Theories book are on Amazon. It's a novel. It's a humorous way of looking at how to grow in presence in today's world. So thanks much, and have a great day.